Well, oh, thank you. Hi. Hi. Well, we're really happy to see all of you, too. Thank you so much for coming on this beautiful spring day when it's probably the first time any of you could have gone outside in weeks. So, but we're all here for a very special reason. How'd you like the film? And needless to say, another phenomenal performance by you. I have to say, too, I'm older than you are, which I'm not afraid to admit to. But watching that film, I was thinking, oh, it's great to see a woman in middle age portrayed as a living, loving, passionate woman, passionate individual who has not stopped doing anything.
Right, and someone who's at the center of her narrative, right?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No.
So again, having related to you in your role in Gloria Bell, notwithstanding the fact that I have a lovely husband and plan to stay that way, it kind of seems like looking at this extraordinary body of work that you either consciously or not, probably consciously, choose a lot of different kinds of women. I feel like you have an opportunity and seek opportunities to kind of live different women's lives in different elements at different ages. Is that?
You never have a plan when you start your career. You just want a job, and you don't know what you're going to be drawn toward. And what I can see now as I look back on a lot of the movies that I've made, I'm drawn to the drama of ordinary life. I'm drawn to real life. I don't. Every once in a while, there's been some fantasy kind of thing in there, but even then, it's like I like relationship drama, I like family drama, I like personal drama. I don't think I've ever played a person who's like climbed a mountain or gone to the moon or anything like that. I'm usually breaking up with someone or having an affair or something like it. And I love that. I feel like there's more drama in an ordinary day than there is in all the things that we can make up. And I find that I'm sure that you guys have this experience too, where something outrageous will happen in your life and you say, if this happened in a movie, no one would believe it. And I feel like with Gloria Bell, there's that element of like that all of us have these big lives, and some parts of them they're secret that not everybody sees. And in this, you see this woman do these outrageous, even almost reckless things within an ordinary life, and it's very. I think it's just it feels very true, and that's always what I respond to.
And that's certainly what drew you to this film.
Yeah.
It is true. I mean, I think the films that you do and the roles that you play give us all an opportunity to see ourselves. Yeah. And to see ourselves in different struggles and different phases. And yes, they've all been terrific. I just watched Far From Heaven the other night, which brought up all kinds of issues. The kids are all right. We showed that. Again, wonderful issues. Mm-hmm. And you're so real and authentic in each one of those roles.
Thank you.
That's why I wonder if you really are all those people.
Well, thank you. I have to say before I forget, I saw Eraserhead here. One of the reasons that I was very anxious to come to Coolidge Corner Theatre is that I went to college in Boston. I went to BU, and and I came because I wanted to be. I was in the acting program, but at the time, Boston was filled with movie theaters and particularly revival houses. So you could just wander in. I didn't know who Truffaut was. I didn't know who Godard was, or Fassbender was, or or David Lynch, or any of these, or Robert Altman. I'd never seen a Robert Altman film. Yeah. So I had all these experiences in these theaters, and so when this opportunity came up, I was like, hell yeah, I'm coming.
Oh, thank you. We're so thrilled to be still standing because, as you know, most of those theaters are gone now.
I know.
And when I moved here 30 years ago from the Detroit area, and I was a big movie, and that's how I spent my time. I worked, and I went to all these different movie theaters, and now here I am.
Yeah.
Another thing you can't make up. It's better than a movie.
Yeah, that's right.
One more question I had about Gloria Bell, and we've heard you talk about you hadn't met Sebastian, and you wanted to make the film, and he didn't know, and you can talk about that if you'd like. But I was curious about the music. Did you collaborate with him at all in the choice of music?
Absolutely did. And as a matter of fact, after our first meeting, we had to speak very specifically about how do you transpose this film to the United States, and what are all the cultural references, and what are the emotional references, and how do we make them accurate. And with the music in the Chilean Gloria, she's singing lots of Spanish love songs, popular love songs. So we needed to find a way to make this music all had to be resonant for people who lived in the United States, and affordable because we didn't have a lot of money, and also pleasurable. They're all really pleasurable, emotional songs. So yeah, we did, and he would. There was actually one instance where Sebastian came in. He goes, "I found it. I found this song. It's so wonderful. It's a love song. It was an international hit." And I can't say the name of the artist because it would be mean. But I said, I said, no, it wasn't an international hit. He never crossed over in the United States. I said he was a star everywhere in the world, but the US. Yeah.
Sometimes we need to catch up.
Yeah.
It was pretty extraordinary, though, that the song Gloria happened to be perfect. So how else would it end?
Yeah.
Shall we open it to the audience? Because I know you're all very excited to have your own questions.
Hi. Hi, Julianne. I have this old photo in color of Far From Heaven,
Oh, my goodness.
which I could see multiple times. What I wanted to ask you is you are so bold and daring in the characterizations.
Yeah.
So in the Robert Altman film, Shortcuts, you're having this raging argument with your lover or husband, and you're half naked from the waist down.
That's the first question, really?
It's like, yeah. Well, no. Well,
Okay, we're looking for that question mark.
No.
Here, let me
but-
tell you about Robert Altman, actually.
Okay.
Who was
So
here,
so
actually?
he was here. So Robert Altman was my hero, and he was the person that like I said, I saw three women, and I think I was probably at the Brattle Theater. I don't know where the heck I saw it, but it was the first time that I went to a movie, and I was like, what is that kind of acting? I've never seen that kind of acting. It was Janice Rule and Sissy Spacek and Shelley Duvall, and I saw this directorial gaze. There was this point of view. For the first time, I sat up and said, somebody is telling me this story. Who is it? And so then I'd managed to mission Nashville and everything. I literally didn't know. I went back and saw all of his movies, and thought, wow, I would love to do that someday. Never imagined that I would be able to work with him. So he saw me in Uncle Vanya when I did it on stage. We workshopped that for 5 years, and he was there in the audience. And I met him for the player. He didn't cast me. And then out of the blue, he called me and said, I have this part in Shortcuts. And called me at home. I thought someone was prank calling me. I was like, this isn't Bob Altman. But what he did that was so amazing and so unusual, and the reason that scene was arresting is not, I think there's probably an issue with the nudity, but really what it is about the relationship. And in the Raymond Carver short story, a lot of what's happening in that story is internal. You hear what the husband is the narrator, so you hear his feelings, and you sense the intimacy of this relationship. So this was something that we could do cinematically that lets the audience feel what Raymond Carver was giving us in a literary sense. So, but Bob was the kind of director who could do that. I mean, in Three Women too, I was like, what was that about? And he said it was a dream I had, and I thought, yeah, okay. So that's why I felt his presence so sharply, because it literally was his dream. He was like, let me put you in my dream. But Bob Altman changed my life. He was the fact that my life intersected with his, that I got to work with him on 2 films. I mean, it was an amazing experience.
And you've worked with so many directors since then, like more than most people could imagine. Another question? Oh, yes, well, since you're right there. Yes, sir.
Considering Gloria, I guess it was about 6 years ago that they had the Chilean version.
Yeah.
How risky was it to do something so quick about the same thing, and what different spin did you put on it this time?
We didn't. It's funny because Sebastian and I we met in Paris at the Bristol Hotel 4 years ago. It was only 4 years ago, and I had seen his movie and just was like, wow, I want to work with this guy. And so it wasn't that I wanted to necessarily do a remake of the film, and he didn't want to do a remake of the film, but we had this conversation, and I was like, well, no, I would do it if you directed it. He said, oh, well, I would do it if you were in it. But I don't think we knew, like, yeah. And then we're like, all right, let's do it. I don't think we really understood how risky it was, just because it was such a beautiful film, and so gorgeously performed by Paulina Garcia. And it was an interesting exercise for both of us. For him, he's revisiting his work. For all of us, though, you know, it's not a remake. It's a make. We're just making the movie. You know, so that's how you approach it. They're probably. I think that honestly, the biggest risk you run is critically. Because the people who see movies, a lot of them are scenarists, and they're going to write about it, and they can take you down. And with a small film too, know that if you get a couple of bad reviews, you don't play anywhere. So there are a few people in this country who can make or break a film. So I think that's where the danger is too, where you're like, oh my gosh, it could have flatlined just because somebody said I like the first one better. In terms of making it, your second part of your question, making it different. I think that every human being, you know, we all share so much, and yet we're all just, you know, slightly unique. So you think of how this was cast and what the kind of the flavors and the energy that every single actor brought to it. It just comes to life in a different way. But it allows you to do that delicate kind of work. We weren't coming in and saying like, you know, we're going to turn it on its head, and we're just like, how do we explore another aspect, what it means to be a human being?
There certainly is more than one story to tell. Yeah. Within that story.
Hi, Julianne Moore. I have a question over here.
Hi.
Hard to see, sorry.
Wonderful performance. You are such a wonderful model for women in terms of your passion for your work.
Thanks.
And the contribution you made in this film. I was enormously fascinated by the relationship that was displayed between Gloria and Arnold. Yeah. And I would like for you to spend a little time talking a little bit about that with respect to the fact, the push and the pull between them, the vulnerability between them, the need for Gloria to be loved but also to be rejected, and the fact that that relationship could be a relationship that a woman would have across the life course from her first relationship to her last, and not only with a lover or with a partner or a spouse, but with colleagues or partners or mentors or people in her life. And so I'd like for you to just describe that a little bit more, what the motivation was for that relationship and how you saw it, and whether or not what I sort of describe as sort of what's been reflected, what you wanted to reflect in the film.
Well, it's interesting that you said that thing about you feel like that relationship could exist anywhere. And one of the very first conversations I had with a woman about this movie, she was in her 30s, and she said it made her realize that she could be just as fucked up in her 50s as she was in her 30s.
Graduate degrees.
Yes, and I was like, yes! But that's exactly right. You know, it's like how do we look at each other? You know, we're always compartmentalizing each other in our lives and our dilemmas. How do we find a way to eradicate that and see each other as human beings, regardless of our age, our gender, our culture, our identity, whatever? And that's one of the things that film does so beautifully, is it kind of disassembles all of that. So like I said, I love relationships and I love love stories. Oh my God, I always, whenever there's like a movie about dating, I want to watch it, you know, or somebody getting divorced, or I just love it. So, right? So with John, who's an actor I'd never worked with, but I knew socially and always really admired, I think that we're both interested in that, in the nature of intimacy and what it means to fall in love with somebody. And if you notice, one of the things that I love too is that, you know, Gloria, right away, his phone rings, and the first response is, "So are you divorced or not?" So right away she thinks, you know, oh, this guy may not even be divorced. So she knows that he's not available, and then he pursues her so relentlessly, and then, you know, she eventually falls in love with him. What's wonderful about it is that you see her kind of intellectual self say, oh, I know what this is. I've been down this road before. And then you watch her emotional self get enmeshed. And you see her then pull away and then get sucked back in when she thinks, like, why not, you know? But because she is where she is in her life, you also realize that she will not accept him on his terms at the end of it. That she is at a point in her life where maybe this has happened to her before. She's like, this time, no. I mean, you sort of see that with the Brad Garrett relationship. He's wonderful too, Brad Garrett playing her ex-husband. I love the moment where Brad explodes and I get up and I go, okay. Because right then you go, oh, I know why they got divorced. And, and it's no longer Gloria's problem. It's Jean Triplehorn's problem. She's like, you take him. So I think that minute exploration of what it means to be in a real relationship with someone, what intimacy is, how meaningful it is to us, how destructive it can be, how empowering it can be, all of those things. I mean, like for me, there's no better or more interesting drama than and then talking to your girlfriend about it too. It's like sitting there with Rita Wilson and saying, and then Rita saying like, I'll pick up the phone. All that. Once again, I'm like, this is something that's so familiar to all of us. So like, it's like why I'm always curious that there's less dramatization of what's familiar sometimes and more dramatization of what's not, because I could talk about this stuff endlessly.
I want to thank you so much, especially for your experience of representing queer women throughout your entire career. I can't tell you how much that means.
Thank you.
So that, and as we've been going through with these questions, I think this is important. You've talked about, different women's experiences and real women's experiences. That's the characterization that you want to take on and in these films, and literature that reflects that. I believe I read something that you have taken on some of the most, an actress that's portrayed a queer woman one of the most times. I did, I read that, I don't know where it was, and I was like, I knew I loved her for a reason. And I have always been a big fan, and my question is, was it important to you to be able to show the gamut of female experience, that it wasn't only heteronormative experience, and be able to show, intimate relationships, as you were just discussing, in a queer situation as well? Or was it just happenstance that you came across these types of roles?
I think, first, thank you very much for that. Thank you. First of all, I consider myself incredibly lucky to have had access to the material that I've had. But I was struck by something when we were talking about LGBTQ and experiences, that The Kids Are All Right was only 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, that movie was considered revolutionary because you saw these women in a stable relationship, in a family, at a time when we didn't have marriage equality. So now you can look at Kids Are All Right and think that it even feels dated socially. And it is, thank God it's dated socially, right? Thank God, because we have come so far, so fast. But to think that we were able, that Lisa Cholodenko was able to introduce this relatively novel idea. Also, it's a comedy. It's not like a big dose of medicine or anything, and do it in a way that it became wildly popular. You realize that's how important representation is. That's how important cinema is, because once you represented somebody, in cinema, you're saying like, take a look. These people exist. They're also letting the audience project themselves onto it, and that kind of identification, that really strong identification, is what builds empathy and what creates the bonds, between us. But I think I don't know that it was purposeful, but I do think I've just drawn to what interests me and excites me, and I wanted to represent a full range of female experience.
Well, thank you so much. It means so much to our community and to me personally. I mean, it led me to go into civil rights law and help with marriage equality and pushing that forward. And you were an icon for me when there was no one else.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
You have demonstrated such an amazing range of normal and everything else women.
They're all normal.
That's true. That's true. Some of us have new normals. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you prepare for, how you explore a new character.
Well, it's funny because I'm actually going to go to BU and talk to the students there right after I speak to you guys. because I realized, you know, when you're young and you come out of, I didn't do anything. I would just read it. I would just read it and start. And of course, because I thought I knew everything. And the older I am, the less I understand and the more research I do. So, you know, I pick apart a script. If there's something that I don't know about, I have no information. You know, for example, if it's about Alzheimer's disease, which I had no personal experience with, I was like, okay. And so, you know, for 2 months, I spoke to scientists and caregivers and people who had been recently diagnosed and relatives, and I watched movies and I read books, and I swore to the directors. I said, it's really, really important to me that I don't do anything on film that I haven't personally seen. I said, because this can't be conjecture. It has to be truth. So I try to do that. I recently played a version of Gloria Steinem in a movie, and we did that with that too. I would just watch footage and try to, it helps me to have as much information as I possibly can. I'll listen to things, you know, I'll listen to someone's voice over and over again. I ask questions. The great thing about being an actor is that people will tell you everything. I mean, people like to tell their stories anyway, right? You know, we want people to hear who we are and what we know. And so if you ask questions, people will tell you things. You say, like, please, you know, help me. What could I do? Or what do you say? Or what does that sound like? Or could you say that for me? Would you mind if I recorded it? And it's fun because it's like being an anthropologist, but, you know, with better clothes, I think. But yeah, that's my favorite part, actually, is doing the research now, is the beginning, is getting ready.
You mentioned Robert Altman discovering you with Vanya on 42nd Street, directed by Andre Gregory. That was such a fascinating film, and shown here at the Coolidge. I saw it here at the Coolidge.
The longest running film in 30 years.
Wow, really?
Yes, yes. And Andre Gregory was here. But can you explain, which I have never understood, how you got involved with it and what that production was?
Thank you for asking that question. I very rarely get to speak about that because people don't know how it happened. So I had just finished I'd done a soap opera. For my first big job was a soap opera called As the World Turns. And then I immediately got off the soap opera and I did Hamlet at the Guthrie, and then I worked at Actors Theater of Louisville, and then I did this play at the Public Theater called Ice Cream and Hot Fudge, and there was a guy, we were sharing a dressing room with a theater group called Mabou Minds, and they were an experimental theater group, and there was a guy named Jack Doolin who was their stage manager who I knew from around. And my girlfriend, Finn Carter, who I'd been on As the World Turns with, we would always share information about auditions, and she said, I have a meeting with Andre Gregory about this workshop of Uncle Vanya. And I was like, and she goes, Jack Doolin called me. So I walked over to the Mabou Minds dressing rooms and I said to Jack, I'm like, my friend has a meeting with Andre Gregory and I don't. And he said, yeah, well, you know, you're not really right you're kind of in between the roles. I was 27. He said, you're not quite a Yelena and you're not quite a Sonia. And I was like, well, can I just meet him anyway? And he was like, yeah, you can meet him anyway. And it turned out that Andre actually lived on my block. He lived on Central Park West. I lived on 71st Street, so he lived on the much nicer side of it. But I went to his house and we had this long conversation. And at the end of it, he said, what are you going to do after this play? I said, I think I have to make some money because I'd done a bunch of theater and stuff, and now I have to try to maybe go to LA and make some money. He said, why don't you stay here this summer and do this workshop with me? And so I was like, okay. I still don't know to this day what Andre saw in me. Like I said, when I started that play, it was 5 years of workshopping that play because we just kept coming together like year after year, every little break we had, every little vacation. I had no understanding of who Yelena was or why she was in this situation, and it was so interesting the way it was cast, you know, and the fact that I was actually playing that George Gaines, who was I think 72 at the time we started, was playing my husband. So that idea of a 27-year-old woman married to a 72-year-old man was, you know, it seemed outrageous on stage, you know. So we were playing with all these. Anyway, it was awesome, wonderful, and then we ended up, you know, filming it with Louis Malle. But that was once again another really transformative time for me as an actor, because because we workshopped it for so long, we never were able to preconceive what it was. So I was able to kind of let my reactions be what they were, just behave theatrically, and then eventually in the film too. And I credit Andre with that, with teaching me how to do that kind of work. And talking about people telling you things, Andre said to me, "I never know where Wally goes after rehearsal. I never know where he goes. It's very mysterious." I said, "He goes to New Jersey where he has an apartment and he writes." And Andre said, "How do you know that?" I said, "Because I asked him." Anyway, I loved that experience. It was really formative for me as an actor and as a human being.
Oh, I think you can be done. I think we can send you to BU even though we could keep you here all day.
Oh, right. Oh, gosh.
And we will look forward to seeing you later tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. My God, thank you so much. You're all so wonderful and so generous, and it really means the world to me. So thank you very much. Thank you.